If I'm not wrong, the Patanjali Yoga Sutras are amongst the foundational texts in yoga philosophy. Can you explain how Patanjali describes asanas and their significance in the eight limbs of yoga?
So yes, they are very significant. So the one of the most cited texts and most discussed. So in terms of asana, actually, that is only mentioned a few times, I think 3 times, and is described as steady, seated posture, actually. So that is also another thing. Asana used to be just seated posture, grounding, making sure that you have that element of earth underneath you and feel it inside of you. While now we talk more about asanas being about the muscles and the ligaments, joints, fascia, etc. But there's not much mention of asana in the Yoga Sutras, but it's also said that it should be practiced with joy and effortlessly. And that's something that I bring across in all my classes. It should be effortless. If you're struggling too hard, then you're not ready. And asana is actually not the most important thing. But basically, this is all for you to manage to rid yourself of this duality that I've mentioned before. But the whole of the Yoga Sutras, it's about the human experience. It's about the psychology and the philosophy of the human experience with a lot of practical advice. And yes, there is asana. But in terms of the gunas, so sattva, rajas, tamas, the detachment with sattva being sort of the one that the one we want to strive for towards enlightenment. But then there's the movement, desire, but also creativity. So not everything is just negative, right? And then there's tamas, delusion. The asanas are a starter for 10. That is something that you can easily start with and get better at. Something much easier to master than the mind. That takes longer. And we're all made up of these, of a certain disposition. Again, back to Ayurvedic doshas. We don't just have to call this the gunas, it's the doshas as well. How much vat, pit, kapha is in your body? What is your main dosha? And that goes back to epigenetics, right? With what are we born with? What is this certain disposition that we have? What is our karma? What has been our karma rather than the karma that we're creating? But the essential sutra for me is Yoga's Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And that is yoga is the stilling of mental fluctuations. So asana is part of that. And if you take asana, then you will say that asana is the stillness in a posture that will lead you to stillness of the mind. That is what it is. So when you find that stillness, it makes sense as well. I talked about the pran. If you're standing in a posture in your asana and you're listening to your breath, that is the first step. Because then when your breath adjusts, goes back to its baseline, the calm baseline, you know that posture is for you and you can stay there for minutes without hurting your body. And I don't just mean the physical, I don't just mean the muscles. The muscles you may shake in your body, but be fine because your breath is telling you we're okay. Because what does the breath do? The breath sends messages to the brain through the vagus nerve, which we now know, but this was all known. This was intuitive wisdom that is all in the scriptures and that the ancient yogis knew, even if they didn't call it the vagus nerve and we're sparking parasympathetic activity. But that is what is going on. And through more salivary excretion, we're changing. So as we know, right, why do we do a saliva test to measure stress levels, for example? It has an effect on the levels of stress, immunoglobulin, suppressor molecules, tumor suppressors, all of these things. And when we're breathing in a proper way, then we're also changing our brain waves. So if we're breathing slowly and focusing on exhalations, which are a function of the parasympathetic nervous system, so that rest and digest system that calms you after a bout of stress, you slow down your brain waves, taking them from maybe an agitated beta to a calmer alpha, getting even calmer and calmer towards a meditative state. But there's all these changes happening in respiration, heart rate, blood pressure, blood sugar levels. So with our asana practice, we can go from sympathetic to parasympathetic nervous system. And that is the idea when we're talking about asana being stillness of the mind stillness of the body in order to achieve stillness of the mind. There are other ways, and sorry that I'm jumping a little bit, but when we're talking about vinyasa and faster or kundalini kriyas as well, there is also the way that you can stress your body and take yourself to the stress edge, really sparking that crazy sympathetic activity in order for the afterwards to be a lower baseline than you have achieved before that. That was off topic now, but that is essentially the Yoga Sutras, a way, again, Moksha Shastra, a way for you to achieve enlightenment. And in that, they're very similar to Buddhist teachings in the Pali language. So, for example, practicing mindfulness, you practice non-judgment to stay away from attachment. or addiction in its extreme form, and you stay away from aversion. So no good, no bad. And that's Patanjali says that too. In order to achieve samadhi, enlightenment, moksha, etc., you have to overcome attachment and aversion. And
True.
there is also the ego mentioned in both.
Vasanti, you talked about self-study a lot, and I can see that being reflecting from the way you're, giving the answers, and you have shared some immense knowledge. But for many out there, guidance is required. They are not able to trot the path on their own. And with the way our sutras and Vedas have been written, somebody who doesn't have the basic knowledge of one, understanding Sanskrit out there, because most of them are written in Sanskrit, and two, actually interpreting the true meaning of those shlokas or the grunts that have been written. How do you see guidance and self-study, the balance between both of them?
You do need guidance. You need to find the right teacher. And I mean, it's not that in the West you can't have a good teacher. That is not what I'm saying. But in my experience, the teachers that I have had have not come from the West. So that is not to say they aren't around. I've just not met them. The ones that I've mentioned to you, Vikramjit Singh, he's wonderful. There's commentaries on the Yoga Sutras. There's commentaries on the Gita. I'm not expecting anyone to, and learning Sanskrit is also not something that happens. Learning a language is not happening in a day. And learning Sanskrit is not like learning French or Italian. You can't immerse yourself in the language. There is no Duolingo around. It is more like learning Latin because it's not a language that is being spoken, but it's a very accurate language. It is a perfectly created, that is what it means, language. But there's commentaries on the Gita that I can recommend, that I have recommended before and that have been recommended to me. And that is where I would start. And then if you're seeking that knowledge, again, find someone who is speaking your language. And I'm not saying the language, your mother tongue, but your language and the way that you are thinking. Some people can explain, when you have a card deck and you divide it in two and then you shuffle those cards or you mix them and you take them up and you mix them together.
Yep.
Someone, like lots of friends of mine were trying to explain to me how that could work. People in my language, it didn't work. I went to India, young, early age, didn't speak Hindi well. And with my rudimentary Hindi and someone else, in fact, she was speaking Pahari. She explained to me how you shuffle this card deck like that. And it made sense to me. So it wasn't the language, it was the way that she taught me. And that is something that you need. You need the right teacher. So it's hard for me to say, go there, go there, go there, because they worked for me. But I am one person with a certain disposition and a way of learning that may not be your way. And we also may need to accept that self-study is not for everyone. But I think everyone needs to try.
That's true. They do need to try and they do need to give an attempt, because only through experimentation or experiences they will understand what's their true calling and what actually reverberates with them, what really echoes within them. So until unless they're not giving it an attempt, they would never know.
Exactly, exactly. And the Gita is, you can study the Gita all your life. There's no end.
I agree. That I agree. I'm yet to get onto the path of understanding Gita. But yes, from the people whom I've talked to, the different experts, they all say that you can never understand Gita in just one single lifetime.
Yeah,
But
and Hindus say you don't have to because you have many lives.
yeah, that's true. Before I get on to my next question, just continuing with the previous discussion, how do I know whether who is the right teacher for me or who is the right person to guide me? How do I really define that for myself?
That is a difficult question. I think maybe I can take that into the realm of energy, and us being energy, beings of energy and vibration. We may not recognize that, but when we look at our language, why do we say things like, I'm on the same wavelength with this person, or this thing that they said resonates with me, or I don't like this person's vibe. So there's a lot that we're intuitively picking up on from someone else, even if we don't believe in the concept of energy, which, to be honest, it's basic quantum physics, so let's believe in it. But I would say a teacher doesn't have to, no teacher is perfect and nobody knows everything. The
Mhm.
teacher that you find needs to know what you want to know and needs to bring that across to you in a way that makes sense to you. That's what I mean when I talk about speaking someone's language. I'll give you an example. So I'm obviously focusing on the corporate world. I also teach elsewhere, but when I teach in a corporate environment, and that's the same with the instructors that I send out to teach, I make very sure that they don't say the things that they may use in yoga studio, where they may focus very much on, although I've never been a fan of the sort of what I would call the emptiness of saying something like, see your inner beauty, or thank your body for this practice, or something like that, because it feels completely empty to me. It feels like something that people are expecting in a class, certain people, but that's not me. But what I do in a corporate environment, and to be honest, everywhere else as well, I want to speak the language of that person. So if you have someone in front of you who has never done yoga before, they don't know what it's about, but they will have certain misconceptions of it being maybe a spiritual thing. And maybe they are put off by that because they associate spirituality with hippie, which it isn't for me. I will define spirituality in a very different way. But to a person like that, I will speak of Sanskrit. I will speak of neuroscience. I will speak of epigenetics and quantum physics. I will speak of evolution and what verticality of our body means for our senses that no one is talking about, but that are so crucial to yoga, the proprioception and equilibrioception, which are so much more important than the five senses that we focus on, the Aristotelian ones. And in fact, the Upanishads mention more than that. They talk of more than five senses already. But there is a way that you can speak to one person, picking up on what they may be interested in. So it's all about listening. And a good teacher should listen and not just send out, but know what it is that their student want. In a class of 20 people, and if it's just asanas that you're teaching, you also need to know, what do these people need? Not what do they want, because sometimes that is very different from what they need, but pick up on what they need, what actually helps them. Are they all super stressed and you need to pick them up there and can't immediately do a meditation for them? Then do something else that helps them stress themselves more to take them down, if that is what they need. And yes, philosophy as well, the wisdom of the philosophy, the stories of the asanas, all of that is something that is important to me. And because it is important to me, I make sure that I bring that across in a way that doesn't come across as, I guess, too strongly for someone who has maybe not been exposed to it. But who the right teacher for you is only something that you can decide, because you are you and you are going through this experience of your life. No one else can tell you that.
I agree that. Thanks a lot for, answering that, putting it into some context for our listeners to be able to find the right guidance for them on this path of yoga. If you can help me understand what's the relationship between asanas, pranayama, and meditation. These are the three most commonly heard terms that we often listen to when we're talking about yoga. Are they the same or they're different, how they're interlinked with each other? So if you can just demystify this for us.
So there is standalone pranayama, but it will be practiced in asana. It could be typically padmasana or the lotus pose. Can be something else as well. Can be shukasana, can be all sorts of things, vajrasana, etc. But in pranayama, you sit and you focus fully on the breath. In asana practice, you will also have to focus on the breath. If you don't, then you're not practicing asana. Then you're just standing in a random posture. And meditation is the same. Meditation in its most simple form. And if you've not meditated before, then maybe this is the best way to explain it. It is a concentration. So if your mind is not engaged in the process of what is going on in your body, then you are not practicing yoga. You could be window shopping and standing in tree pose, or in any other pose, right? But you're in the middle of Oxford Street, or I don't know, Connaught Place, or wherever you are in the world, and you're in a particular posture, but it only becomes yoga when the mind is involved and when the breath is involved. And with the breath comes the pran and the pranic response, and the response of the pran, which influences the whole of the body. So there is no asana without pran and without concentration. But meditation and pranayama can be standalone things as well. But everything, just like the different marks that we have in yoga, should be seen as different paths that should not be walked on their own. But it's a journey of let's call it one path, but three different people that are intimately linked, and they are holding hands and they're not letting go.